Hello, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here, Sabrina.
Thank you for having me, Erica. I've been listening to your podcast for ages now, so it's
Oh
like
my gosh.
really
Now
good that I
you
can
get
actually be
to
on
be a
it and
part
have a
of
good chat with you.
yeah, and you get to be a part of the whole revamp of the new energy of what's going
Yes.
on. So, yeah, this you'll be the first interview, the first person to kind of launch me forward and the first interview of the new year, which is quite exciting.
Exactly. Happy 2024.
Yeah. Okay, so I just want to give them a little bit of a background of how we know each other. So I met you back in India, and we were
Yeah.
doing it's crazy. Back in India, we were doing a Kundalini Yoga retreat, and or I don't know if you could say retreat really. It's just kind of like a training really. But yeah, so we met in India from that. So how did you just on that background, how did you actually land there? I forget how you found your way to India and what brought you to that space firstly.
Yeah. Well, I think it was firstly the first trip after COVID. So that to me was something that I had wanted to do for, I think it was for my 30th birthday. I'd always wanted to go to India, get my Kundalini yoga certification. I just had this vision that I would become a yoga teacher. like, but that didn't come into fruition. But I was doing so much research because there's so many yoga studios, and I just felt like I wanted to go to one that had a good reputation. So a friend of mine had gone there previously. She raved about it. So I booked in to do the course, and that's when we met. And
Oh
it was
yeah.
definitely a really cool experience. And yeah, I learnt a lot. And we were just talking earlier, but it's a bit unfortunate. I don't actually continue it as much as I thought I would. So,
Yeah, isn't that funny?
yeah,
I don't either. I ended up I followed really Ailish to the yoga place, and I was like, she's like, oh, I'm going to India for
oh,
this, and I was like, oh, I'll join. So that's kind of how I didn't do any research about it, which is usually what I do in my personality, and so that last year was very much of me trusting my flow of okay, I'm just gonna go where I'm led and not overanalyze it. And so I was like, okay, I'll come with you. And but yeah, I haven't really done a proper Kundalini yoga session. I don't even think since then. I did a little bit of the breath, more of the pranayama stuff. I do more of the breath stuff.
yeah,
And like I was saying before, the Ayurvedic stuff I did more applying to my life. I think that's the major thing that I've carried through the teachings of giving, like I had said earlier, just giving permission for myself of how we learned the earth and air and fire personalities, and it's knowing my
yeah. Which one were
combination made me be
you?
oh, I was fire earth.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, fire earth. And what were you, air or
Yeah, I was air, like just
air?
spot on air.
Straight
So airy fairy.
up. Yeah, so I feel learning about those things where it was how to balance myself within my own nature. And I think that's what was really cool is oh, I'm this way, let me just be the most me. And that's kind of my theme of this year anyways, is to get back to what's the most me, you know? So
Yeah,
Ayurveda definitely helped me do that. Yeah. Yeah.
I
But all
love
right,
that.
so
It's so
fast
weird that
forward
we.
now. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, no, no. I was just going to say it's quite interesting that we both set this intention to go to India and learn more about Kundalini, but then it kind of streamed out to other teachings in yoga because Ayurveda is huge. And did you end up seeing the Ayurvedic doctor?
Yes.
And
And that was mind
yeah,
blowing. Mhm. I even I kept her sheet cuz I was just so whoa, I've never had any kind of consultation or doctor's visit like this, because she was asking me things about my childhood, or looking at did my pulse, just random things, and was just asked a few things about me, but then mostly the whole session was like telling me things about me. And so like what would help me, what would hurt me. And then I was like able to tell her like, oh, these are the issues that I had the last few years and now they've gotten better. Like my acne and weight and stuff like that. And she was just like, well, yeah, because you were like completely against your nature. And so it was like, oh, that makes sense. Like that would have been helpful to know. But
Yeah, like back
yeah,
in the day. Oh,
yeah. But so since like that we had last seen each other, what have you been up to? I know we want to talk about your big trip, but let's just take it from there. Like what else did you learn from those teachings, do you think, besides like actually like Kundalini yoga, or like what's been going on in life?
so I as well saw that Ayurvedic teacher, which I thought was amazing. Um, and Layla, who we did our training with, she was the acupuncturist. So she um, really triggered my interest in Chinese medicine. So I ended up looking more further into Chinese medicine from that trip, which is very random. But I just find that sort of medicine really responds well with my body. So I've been starting to getting acupuncture done. I then went into, because I'd done my interior designing training a few years ago, and they had a small component of feng shui. So I really started going down that rabbit hole, which I'm really passionate about, but it's more of like a passion project, if that makes sense. Um, and then what I wanted to chat with you today about was last year I went and did a amazing, like mind-blowing walk, which is called the Camino, and that is based in Spain. So that's the most recent trip I've been on. And yeah, so that's pretty much what I've been up to. Did a lot of
Whoa.
travel, and now I'm back to a 9 to 5 job.
Wow. Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. So
Yeah, there's a lot to
let's
unpack there.
talk about your yeah. It was a big question like to start off, but okay, so let's talk about your trip to Spain. Like what is it? Because I have never heard of it until like you had spoke about it. So like what is it? How long is it? What do you do? How did you even find like that's what you wanted to do? Like let's get into that.
Yeah, sure. So, I first heard of the Camino through a really lovely friend of mine. She'd mentioned it, just in passing, nothing too serious. So I had heard of it. I love hiking. Like, I think there's just something so magical about being out in nature, exercising. So I've done many hikes before, but I've never done like hiking where it's continuous. You just go for a day hike or something. And I went recently over to Switzerland to spend quality time with my grandma because she was quite sick. And basically, in a nutshell, what the Camino is this is a pilgrimage. It's a walk that can start pretty much anywhere over in Europe, and it ends in, and I'm so bad with my Spanish, but Santiago
It's
de
okay.
Compostela, which is a town in Spain, and it's at this beautiful cathedral, and this is where it's thought to have the remains of the Apostle James. So it's also deemed as like a religious walk, so it's got that Christian Catholic background. And this walk can go from 30 days to a few days, depending on your walking speed. And it's just that, I don't want to say the word grueling, but it is very physical and spiritually demanding on the body because you are tracking 20, you could do 30 Ks a day on terrain that can range from nice cobblestones to like little hills, mountains, rivers. So it's starting to gain a lot more popularity now. But back in the day, this pilgrimage, majority of Catholic Christians did it, but now it's open to the world and people from all walks of life go and do this.
Wow. That's insane. So how long did you go for and how many days did you do it for?
So the Camino came up very randomly. Like just to paint a bit of a picture, as I touched on before, I went over to Switzerland to spend time with my grandma. So I went
Yeah.
there with the intention that I'm going to spend a good month with my grandma, and then I'll go back to Australia and continue life basically. Um, but when I did get to Switzerland, I spent 10 beautiful days with my grandma, and then she passed. And I know this sounds really strange, but I didn't anticipate that to happen because she'd been in palliative care for about 8 months. So I kind of had this thing where I'm going to spend a good month with my grandma and then I'll come back to Australia and then a few months more we'll get a phone call. So I think that was just me kind of, trying to positive thinking, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when my grandma did pass, that was a very confronting moment in time because grief is such a heavy and horrible feeling. And when my grandma passed, I spent the next few days just in this kind of, oh, I'm meant to be spending time with my grandma. Like now, like I had family around, which is great. It was lovely seeing them again. But then it just was like, I'm in
What do I
Switzerland.
do?
Spain is like,
Yeah.
a, you know, not far at all. I'm going to go do a walk. And this walk is
Mm.
renowned to have this spiritual and awakening and,
Mm.
therapeutic, let's say. So I was like, I think that's what I really need right now. So I booked flights to Spain. And yeah, the whole idea behind the Camino is for it to be flowing. So you can plan it if you wish, that's cool. But the concept is you just wing it. And during this time, it's going to test yourself. And just with this, the grief I was going through, I always have been drawn to nature. So I was kind of like, oh, this is a nature walk. It'll be out in nature. This will probably be good for me. So that's how I ended up there. So it was just a series of events that kind of led me there. I never planned I'm going to go to Spain and do this walk.
Wow. There's like, I think it's almost circles back to even like how we started talking about the Kundalini, where like you go there for an intention of thinking that you're going there to learn Kundalini. You go there to visit a whole month with your grandma, and then the universe gives you kind of, it's like it's bringing you there for the reason that you're going there, but also we don't actually really know what the actual reason is until in hindsight. So it's like Kundalini Yoga course, but then you're interested in Chinese medicine. Now that's what's healing you. And then also you go there for your grandma, but it's like now you're redirected in a way that you spent time. That's just so much to go through, but also how beautiful for that spiritual walk to go afterwards, like right after that, like talked about like being cracked open, like losing somebody, and then going through that trek. Like it's kind of, it doesn't, I mean, nothing's planned. We can never plan anything, but it just seems like quite the coincidence where you're given this opportunity and time to be like, oh, yeah, I'm gone now. So now you can do your thing and continue to do this unplanned trek. Cause it's kind of like all of it was unplanned for you. Like, so that just seems very like parallel and how it's so beautiful that things present themselves so differently than what we like plan in our heads and like anticipate to do. So that's just seems so interesting for that piece. So what part of the trek was like the most um because you mentioned it was physical and spiritual. It did your days kind of, some were easier days, some were harder days? Did it feel more physically some days, or how did it also come up spiritually, and how did that like help you through the grief process too? Like talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So when I flew into Spain, because unfortunately I'm not bilingual, I don't speak any other languages other than English. I came from Switzerland, which is like more German speaking, to then going into a language, Spanish, where I can't say anything in Spanish other than hola. And the walk I did started in Soria, which was a four day hike for me. Other people do 30 days. So it's really good where people can tailor the walk to suit what they want.
Mhm.
My whole journey was so unplanned, and that was something I really struggled with because I used to be a travel agent back in the day, and I love structure. I love itineraries. Like, you're staying at this place, you're going to check out these locations, eat at this restaurant, like very structured. So when flying into Spain and beginning the hike, where it's like I've only got basic understanding of I've got to follow these scallop signage basically, and you just follow it. And my brain's thinking, well, what if I go down the wrong one? Or like, you just get in your head a lot. So when it comes to like day to day, how it was looking, um, it was a very beautiful and forever changing. Like, I started in Soria, and just even getting into Soria was very hard. Like, there was a massive bus strike, and it hadn't happened in like 30 years. So out of all the times I was there was a massive bus strike. So getting to and from was just a nightmare. Um, and of course, with me not speaking any Spanish, I didn't know what was going on. And I really started leaning into communicating with people. And you may not be able to speak their language, but just having conversation, well, not really conversations, really, interacting with people and be able to get your point across was quite special. And with the question you're asking about touching base more on the spiritual and physical aspects of it, physically, when you're tracking 20 to 30 Ks a day with like a backpack on, you're getting blisters, your shoulders are in so much pain, you get hungry. It's just very taxing on the body. And with the emotion of grief that I was experiencing, and this is something that was quite, what I want to say, expansioning, is
Yeah.
I didn't have anything to distract me. I didn't have my phone. Like, okay, I did have my phone, but I couldn't, jump on Instagram. I couldn't call a friend. I couldn't, just doom scroll. I couldn't distract myself. So when I was having these memories and these really sad feelings, I feel like I process this in a way I've never done before, where it's like, I need to be present with this, and I'm not just going to distract myself, I'm going to actually go through it. And I think it was just being out in nature and being among the trees and having this horrible emotion come over me, and I'm just going through it. And this would last for a while, but as time went on, it would leave. And I started thinking, okay, this is interesting. Like, I haven't ever really sat with my feelings for this long in time. So spiritually, I felt that it helped me process and come to terms with the death of my grandma in a healthy way. I didn't turn to, like, drugs, alcohol, rock and roll kind of stuff. I was really present with my grief.
Wow. It sounds like exactly what we are meant to do when we feel things. And I don't think that, yeah, I mean, all of us, I would say the majority of us are so disconnected from that. And I think there is a collective journey to get back to that. Like, you see like a lot of people like getting back to somatic practices and talking about the feeling go through the body, but even day to day uncomfortable feelings, we reach for a phone and we reach for that other person or that dopamine hit, or we listen to something. And I mean, I'm definitely one who does those things. But it sounds like you're just there with yourself, but then you have the biggest supporter ever, which is like Mother Earth around you. So like, how healing is that? Oh my gosh, I can't imagine going through something like that in support. It's like, it seems like it's such a huge journey that like you were kind of taken on. And okay, so for the trek, like in between, just logistic wise, like in between you're trekking that much per day, where do you stay overnight? Like, what's the accommodations like on those kind of treks?
It is not glamorous. Think India, where we stay.
Okay.
and like go down a few stars. um, the
That,
the yeah, just to be realistic. Um,
oh
look,
man, I can only imagine.
Um, the beauty of the Camino is you can make it however you want. There are people that, go luxe, like they stay in five-star accommodation. There's people that travel by horse or ride bikes, or um, the way I did it was the more standard way. So if you ever, and I strongly recommend, Eric, you should go do the Camino. Basically,
You know
how
I
it
would love
works
it.
is you rock up to your starting point, and you get a pilgrim passport. And I've just recently moved, so I'm so upset I don't have my pilgrim passport with me. But it's just a little passport, and every place you go, you need to get you need to get 2 stamps a day when you start the track, because when it finishes, you have to hand in your passport to get your certificate of completion. So this passport also acts as a, I guess, proof to places. Hey, I'm on the Camino. So there are churches, there are Albuquerques, which are like hostels. So picture like a room full of like 20 bunk beds, and a lot of places are free, like you just donate. But then you can also go to hotels and get private rooms, and I think maybe 50 euros plus for that. I chose to go more rogue and just go to the Albuquerques, which pretty much everyone else was doing. It is a lot more cost effective in comparison to going 5 stars. I personally wanted to test myself because I do feel that I do love my creature comforts. I love, you know, nice things, like I think pretty much all of us do. So I wanted to do more rogue. So this was a bit of a shock to the system. Um, you know, yeah, but it was a great way to meet people doing the Albuquerques. So
Mm.
and some beautiful places, like staying in churches, and um, beautiful candle. Like it was pros and cons with every place, right? But yeah, you can stay pretty much in these dormitories, and it's an experience.
Kind of like some like hostel vibes or things like that. It kind of sounds
Yeah,
like. Yeah. What do you have like a
yeah,
favorite
hostel with
experience? Oh, do you have like a favorite experience with
um
like conversation or something that happened along the trek that is like in your brain?
oh, so let's get woo woo now, because there was so many times on this trip
Yeah.
that I had moments where I was like, is this really happening? So um when you go down the rabbit hole of Caminos, you hear some crazy stories of people having weird experiences. And like people even meet the loves of their lives on these trips. Like everyone's got a story to tell when they do the Camino. So, in answer to your question, with something that really stuck out, and something that I can never forget is, um, so just to paint a bit of a picture, just so you can understand a bit better. When I was visiting my grandma over in Switzerland, every day I would bring her a mandarin. So after lunch, you know, she'd have mandarin, because my uncle bought a big bag. So every day it just came routine. So when I was leaving the house, I'd grab a mandarin, go over, spend time with my grandma. And when she passed, um, there was one mandarin left. And I just remember looking at that mandarin the next day, and I was like, oh, I'll grab that and I'll go spend time with my grandma, but that's not happening anymore. So there was just this mandarin, and everyone's just like, oh, it's just, and I was like, it just meant something to me. And I just was like, um, I had a beautiful conversation with one of my dear friends, Donna, and she said to me, she goes, when you go to Spain, your grandma would be with you. And I just said to her, I was like, I don't really feel a presence, or my I don't know. Like, that didn't really mean much to me when she said that, but later on it did. So when I was leaving to go to Spain, the mandarin was on the counter, and I was like, right, I'm just going to take this mandarin with me, and I'm going to hike the Camino, and I'm going to do it in honor of my grandma, and I'm just going to plant this mandarin somewhere beautiful, right? So this mandarin traveled the whole route with me. And as I was touching on before, there was moments where I would be grieving my grandma, like I would be thinking of her, and the horrible feeling will come up. And no joke, I'm in the middle of nowhere, like, and a mandarin peel would be there. And I was like, that's strange. But obviously someone's eaten a mandarin and, but it was just so random, like in the middle of nowhere, there'll be a mandarin peel. And I was like, oh, it's strange. And it just kept happening. Like I'll be looking in a river and then all of a sudden a mandarin peel would like sweep, like, wash by. And I was like, this is weird. And there was a moment where I experienced so much kindness on that trip. Like as soon as I started walking on the Camino, there was not one bit of fear. I was all alone. Like I watched so many horror movies. I could have been kidnapped, the works, but I never once felt unsafe. And I know I'm just being honest. And
No,
there was a moment in
literally. I
time
think
when I
that
was
would,
so tired.
yeah.
No,
I think
sorry.
that's
What
like
were you
one of the
saying?
things that like, sorry, I think our lag time on our internet might be overlapping, but I was just like the few things that one, the Mandarin is just like so hyper specific to you. And that's our woo woo signs of just like, that was specifically for you. And it's just like how incredible and how meaningful too along your path that you see those things. And then second, I feel like if anybody's listening, like one, they'd be like, okay, this hike sounds really cool. I definitely want to do it. But like what you just said, am I going to get murdered out there? Like I'm all alone. That's like the hyper focus, especially being female. You're always thinking about like, how can I protect myself? Do I need to be armed? Like, am I going to be attacked? Like, am I going to be kidnapped? Like, so I think that
Oh,
you spoke to a
100%.
very, yeah. So, okay, brilliant. Okay. Keep talking about the kindness.
So, but yeah, look, those thoughts do go through your head. But I honestly experienced nothing scary. Like I was never scared, and I just found the kindness came out from people all around me. But to pretty much wrap up these unforgettable moments on the Camino is that there was this time when I was so exhausted and I just plopped myself down and I was just tired. I was just resting under a tree, and a few moments later, this random man sat next to me, and we figured out straight away we can't communicate. He doesn't. I don't speak. We don't speak the same language, so it was just like, oh, okay, hey. Um, and then he reached in his bag and he gave me a mandarin, and I was just
Oh.
like, what? Like it was just these mandarin things, just, and I didn't. It was just very bizarre, and it was just like he just gave it to me, and then he got up and he kept walking, and I was just there going like, oh, because it would just be this weird, like whenever I'll be thinking on my grandma, a mandarin would appear. And in that time when I was sitting under the tree, I was thinking of my grandma, and this man sat down. I was like, oh, hey, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden, this mandarin. So that to me stuck to me. So I can never see a mandarin the same again. And one other thing that really freaked me out, like I get goosebumps even thinking about it, was there was this. So as I was mentioning before, you get a pilgrim passport and you get stamps. So you need to get 2 a day to indicate you did it, because not that people cheat, but you just need proof. So a lot of the churches did it, a lot of the cafes, and I was in this really remote part of the walk. Like there was pretty much not much around, and there's just this random little cute church. And um, I was walking into it and I bumped into this American lady actually. She was a hoot. She was singing as she was walking, so you could always hear her a mile away. It was great. She was having a great time. So she walks out and she's just like, oh, the guy in there's blind, so you need to help him do your stamp. And he gives you a little pin. And I was like, oh, that's cute. So she went off and then I went in and it was this tiny little room. And I go in and he's speaking Spanish. I think he's doing prayer. And I went in there and I got my passport out. And he stamps it for me. Like he stamps it. And then he goes and gets 2 little badges and he gives it to me. And I was like, oh, no, what was it? Uno is 1, I think. I was like, oh no, just it's like I was just trying to tell him. I was like, it's just me. So I'm like trying to give it back because it's and he then I don't know how to describe it, but he like just he grabbed my hand and he put the second one on top and he closed my hand. And then I just remember being like looking around and it's like there was no one there, but that's the first time I felt a presence. And it just
Oh,
sounded like I know this sounds weird, but I just felt
just
my
getting
grandma
body
around
chills
me
as
there.
you're
And
describing this.
yeah, like honestly, like that's the only time I've ever really been
Wow.
like, yeah, it really, I'm not gonna lie, it freaked me out because there's this just me and this man, and I'm like, okay, and I walk out of there and I'm a bit in like a, oh, that's weird, and I was like, in my head, I'm like, look, he maybe just got confused, or, and I was like, no, I try to give it back. Like, I'm trying to reason, right? And one of the big things on the Camino is you're carrying your backpack and you are minimalistic because you don't want to be carrying a lot of stuff, right?
Mhm.
It's heavy. So you really make means with like the small things, right? So I had these two badges and I was just like, I think, I was like in my head, I was like, I think he felt my grandma there and that's why he gave me two. And I was like, no, it's just in your head, Sabrina. He's just giving you two. And I randomly then bump into this couple that, sorry to backtrack a lot, when there was that lovely bus strike, I ended up sharing a taxi with two Irish people, like a couple. And the Irish guy, I said, well, I bumped into them and I was like, oh, wow, what are the odds of seeing you guys here? And I was like, hey, look, I got two of these badges, so I want to give you one. So I gave it to the guy because it was his birthday. He's like, oh, it's my birthday. And I was like, hey, I've actually got this spare badge. Like, here, have a happy birthday. And then he's like, thank you. And he's like, look, I'm not really a religious man, but my grandma is going to love this. I'm going to give it to my grandma if that's okay. And I was like, I don't know, just out of all the people, like you don't usually tell people you're regifting a gift, right? And I was like, out of all the people for him to tell that he's giving it to, he's like, I'm going to give it to my grandma. And I was like, oh, this is getting weird.
You just like bawling afterwards, just like he's like, I don't know why,
Oh,
Oh my
so,
gosh. Whoa.
yeah. So, and these stories are not uncommon. Like when you start chatting to people who've done the Camino, there's always stories shared where people have had experiences where they can't explain. Logically, they try and figure it out. And then sometimes you just like, you're on the Camino, things are going to happen, and you just got to be open to it, you know?
Yeah, you just honestly things like that, you're like just accept the magic. Like you're just there and the synchronicities that happen, the reasons why you're on it, I think would be also very specific. Like I don't think that you're just like you're just a rando just being like I'm going to do this hike and it's going to be completely normal. Like part of you probably is doing this for a religious or a spiritual or personal experience to really go through and feel that support. So it's I'm sure there's lots of
No, like
energies and
100%. Like,
yeah. Wow. Just thinking about all the spirits along the way, just kind of like helping everybody along this path. How magical. Wow. How did it feel to like, what was the ending like? Like, how, so you get your passport, you do your stamps, you go as long as you want to go to, in the past that you want to go to, you're staying places that you want to go. So it's very like, whenever you decide it's done, it kind of feels like your own personal journey, which is cool. It's, I think part of it, because I used to do a lot of like marathons and ultra marathons, and like you only felt complete when you crossed the finish line, when you did X amount of time, X amount of miles. And it was like an accomplishment based on that. And I like now, like the more I do things now in life, it feels better for me to do things just because I want to go through the experience rather than it like I'm doing something to like say that I did it or to say like okay I ran those miles. How did it feel like ending this, or like when did you decide you were going to end, and how was like all that experience about like turning in your passport and stuff like that?
yeah, no, firstly, that's amazing you did all those like triathlons, marathons, because that is physically demanding.
I completely understand how you're saying, well, rather than like the daily trek, I've never really experienced like and I would love to do this, where you're hiking for multiple amount of days with like a pack and things like that. Like I've only done it for like the day, like, okay, I did 50 miles. I needed one small pack. You had many people that were giving you like foods and water and their stations and all those things. But to do your own personal trek for multiple days now just feels like, it just feels really exciting. So that probably will be something that I'll do. But carrying that pack day to day seems like even just as much, if not more intense. But yeah, talk about your endings of things.
Yeah, of course. So, yeah, carrying your stuff. So you do have options. Like the Camino can be tailored and created in any way you want. So I was originally looking at doing it with a tour group because I was like, safety in numbers. I'm so scared to go all alone.
Right.
Like, something's going to happen. But then I kind of just had this moment where I'm like, nah, I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to go alone. And companies offer bag transfer. So they will pick up your bag and they will drop it to the next place you're going to be staying at. But what that needs is organization. So you need to know where you're staying that night. And because I really wanted to test myself, because I really, like Erica, I struggle to let go and not plan because I love planning. So that was really hard
Yeah.
for me to just walk, and you walk until you hit this place. And if you want, you can stay, but it gives you that flexibility. So I gave myself a week. I was like, I'm going to take a week to walk this track. And having that ability to do what you want was quite cool. Like you didn't have to reach a certain point because you booked into that place. So tracking and just tailoring it to whatever you felt like that day. Like there would be some days where I just walked maybe like 20 Ks, but then that would really exhaust me. So the next day I did like 10, but then I'll be like, oh, the next day I'll do 30. Like it was just so depending on how I felt. When it started getting towards the end, because strangely, I didn't meet any Australians on this Camino, which every time I travel, I always meet heaps of Australians. I didn't meet one Australian. Everyone was predominantly from Europe. And I would hear how they were tracking, what they were doing. You come across people that had been doing the Camino. This was like their 5th time doing it or something like this, crazy. So I went and did a route which is the more popular one, and I felt safer doing that because, first time being all alone, woman traveler, as we were speaking before, I was like, right, I'm going to do a route that's very popular, so less chance of me getting lost. So you follow these little scallop, postings, and the more I started getting into the rhythm of it, the more I was enjoying it. So by the end of the trip, I felt like I was pro, like, knew how to, set myself up for the day. I didn't have to be panicking as much because when you get hungry, all of a sudden there'll be a village and you can grab this. And the Spanish cuisine is amazing. So I heavily indulged, to say the least. But once I did get to the end, so I gave myself 7 days. I did it in 4. Reason being is I didn't want to just do 10 kilometers a day. I really wanted to push myself physically. So when I finished on the 4th day, I was like, oh, well, I still have, 3 extra days. So I ended up going to Portugal because I've always wanted to go to Portugal. But that was, again, spare of the moment. So I just loved this, freedom of doing whatever you want. But when I was tracking to get to the end, so the end place is the cathedral in Santiago de Compostela. And it's this massive cathedral, like it's huge. And you know, you kind of have it in your head, like, what's it going to be like when you finish, like, crossing that line? And the idea is that you go into the cathedral and there is this like pole, I guess. It's like and you ideally put your hand on it and that's you've done it. And I just remember getting there and being like, in awe of these massive cathedrals. Like I went to a Catholic school growing up. I don't identify as a Catholic, but I'm quite familiar with the teachings and so it wasn't very foreign or overwhelming to be in that setting with religion, because it is deemed a religious walk. However, you don't have to be religious to do it. Like, you meet people from all walks of life that aren't doing it for a spiritual reason. They're doing it more for other reasons. So when I got there and I was like in awe of this, and I felt really proud of myself. I was like, you know what? You've done something that you doubted you would never do. You know, you're completely alone. You relied only on yourself. And there were moments in time when you were freaking out because you were just like, where am I? And you got through it. And when I went to because you go to a passport office, that's what it's called, where you got the little pilgrim thing, and you give your passport over. The guy checks it just to make sure, yep, you've done the tracking. And then he issues you the certificate, and you just feel like you're in like primary school getting like a little certificate of completion. And I was like, I'm so proud. So it was just this feeling of being like, I am really proud of myself, because this world is not as scary as I thought it was. Like, as we spoke before, like, I'm going to get kidnapped, I'm going to get murdered. Like, this gave me a feeling of this world is not a bad place. Sure, there is bad in the world, but the unbelievable kindness I experienced on that, like, Erica, like, I think when you do this, it's so hard to explain it, but it's just everyone's wanting to help you. No one's there to be no one. I didn't experience anyone being rude, anyone being mean. Everyone was sharing, caring, and wanting to help. And it was just such a beautiful feeling. And you can't communicate with each other, but you make do. Like, everyone is in that. I think it brings this, when you go on the Camino, it's this sense of kindness that everyone brings to the table. There's no one out there with bad intentions. Like, sure, this may happen, but like, when I completed it and finished it, I had more faith in this world that people are beautiful, and it's what you make of it. Like, people are bawling their eyes out. People are rocking up with a massive group of kids do it, families do it. A lady with a baby did it. It's just like everyone's so proud of themselves, and it's just such a nice moment to be experiencing. And yeah, so it was just a very proud moment.
That's that sounds just incredible. And I know what you mean. I had like a similar viewpoint shift of like when I was doing like the longer term travel that I did last year, where it's like when you are out in the world and you are around different people of like not your people from like your land with your language, it can feel like, yeah, you're just kind of taught to be always on guard and like, it's dangerous out there. You stay home inside in a safe place. And it like when you do go outside and you put yourself in those scenarios and you're like, wow, actually the world is really great. Like, so like to have that experience on the hike too, because like I realized that too. I was like, wow, yeah, you have to be cautious in a way where like you have to be smart and think about things, but you're not super careless when you're going places and on the trek and stuff. Like, you still have to keep your wits about you, but at the same time, it's absolutely not in like the dangerous frame of mind that you kind of think like, oh, you're going to go out and travel, you're going to go do this trek, like, and it's just it just kind of I find, and it sounds like you had that experience where like the world almost gets smaller in a way where like, oh, we actually can communicate. And I know what you mean about like, you can't speak the language, but somehow you're communicating on all the different ways that we communicate through body language and expression and just like energy exchange and stuff. And so I always find it the most interesting interactions with people when you can't speak the language, when you still can get a lot across of like what you're trying to communicate, but not with words. Like, I think it's one of the coolest things to kind of happen, like in those exchanges. Okay. So after you finish your trek, you're at the big cathedral, then you go to Portugal. How was your Portugal experience?
So Portugal to me was on like, I'm gonna go bougie. Like, I'm gonna go get a flash hotel. I'm gonna indulge. I'm gonna have a bath. Like, it was. I think
Bath, yes.
with Epsom salts. Like it's just amazing. Like you don't realize how sore your legs are and your back. My back was the worst. So
Uh-huh.
um, Portugal was just a great way for me to just treat myself, basically. I went to Porto, which is it was beautiful. I really found that very pretty, sorry, and the food was great. Like I ate so much over there. Um, it was definitely a nice way to wrap it up. Like
Mm.
when I did finish over in Spain, it was kind of like, oh, I could spend a few days here, but I was just like, oh, I'm going to go Portugal, and it was just a bus, and the buses weren't on strike then, so it was great. I can get there. Um, but yeah, so going over to Portugal was a great way to wrap it up. I did choose to do the Camino over the Easter period. That's just how the dates fell. So when I had finished the Camino, it was pretty much, I think, the day before Easter. So the next day, the city was celebrating, and it was very overwhelming because the Erica, I'm gonna have to send it to you on WhatsApp. The ways they celebrated, everyone was dressed in these really pointy hats, like it looked really creepy, and they had all these like it looked like, yeah, I was just really like, whoa, like this massive parade going on, and there was a lot of festivities in the air. So I felt like it was a
Ah,
great time to wrap it up. Everyone was celebrating and went to Portugal and then went back to Switzerland and then back home to Australia. So it was quite a,
oh,
yeah.
what a crazy trip. Wow. And I like, how do you feel now, like with your grandma passing and going through that grief? Like, does it feel, how does that feel now, like as you're in day-to-day life, or like, and not maybe just specifically, not for this question to be specifically about your grandma, but how, yes, and both, I guess. Like, how is it now being in day-to-day life with going through that experience? Like, how are things feeling since then?
Yeah, so since completing the Camino, I feel like it's definitely
Mm-hmm.
left a positive impact. It's definitely changed my mind frame to kindness. Like at the end of the day, we're all humans. I think you're actually great at this,
Mm-hmm.
Erica. You just talk to people. Like we're all people. Like people sitting next to us.
Yeah.
Like we're human. Like I know some people, boundaries up. They don't want to talk. That's fine. But we're human. Like we can ask, hey, because even with that bus closure thing, I don't know what was happening. And it's like, instead of me just going, "Ugh," it's like, ask someone, communicate, and just be more open and be friendly and kind. With the passing of my grandma, like, I feel like I've processed that in a healthy way. Like, I feel, as we said before, like being out in nature and just the environment, I process that, I feel healthily. And now I reflect back on my grandma and think of the good times. And, you know, um, I don't know what's happened with my grandma. That's something that I can't even comprehend. And I'm not going to, stress my brain out trying to figure it out because we're not going to be able to figure it out. So, um, coming back to Australia, it's definitely made me look more into the environment we put ourselves in as well. So, with me going on that trip, this environment was nature, surrounded by kind people, and how much that positively influenced me. And then it's just like in my day to day life, I try to incorporate that, like be aware of my surroundings. And I rave about the Camino. So if anyone's having a hard time, I'm like, you know what? You should go do the Camino. Like, it's just a great way. And I strongly recommend do it alone. Like, it is really cute.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen people like, the couples do it or, sisters or families. But I'm just like, if you do it alone, you only rely on yourself and you just realize how powerful that is. And I think that gives me motivation sometimes, if I'm feeling down, I'm like, nah, you know, you can do a lot on your own.
Yeah. Would be, so what I'm hearing from like the major themes of doing this, and let me know if there's anything more that came up, of like you being able to move through your feelings in real time and be able to grieve in real time. Also trusting yourself, relying on yourself, which is huge. And then also letting go to like the flow of things and not over planning or thinking about the plan. You just let yourself day to day go and be with the flow of how you felt. And I think that would be like maybe the fifth thing of like, you actually really listen to what you wanted to do. You listen to like what felt good, what didn't feel good, not like, oh, this is on schedule, so I have to do this. Like those are major themes and like lessons all within 4 days, which is like incredible. So do you feel like you carried those things now? Because you had mentioned you're back working like 9 to 5, like how, other than like you going out into nature and things like that, and you're like in your day-to-day life, like how did those things kind of interweave of like, yeah, how life is now in this new journey with what you're doing currently?
So I think like firstly that's a great way to sum it up in a nutshell. Like I think over those 4 days, a lot happened, and I think overall it was a great experience for me. And then I do since that trip come home now, and now I'm getting myself back into a routine where I am working full time, and I don't. So I touched on before, like environment. That to me also stuck out at the
Mm-hmm.
Camino. Like I'm in this beautiful, forest, and then I'm in a cobblestone, little village. So I just want to be very mindful of my environment, because when I reflect back and when I'm grieving, I just want to roll up in bed in the dark, and I'm like, that's not an environment that works for me personally. So that kind of changed a lot. So when I am having these, just day to day dramas, instead of me just either complaining about it or like stuff like that, I actually go for a walk, go down to the beach, like just be out in nature. Like I just really look around and be like, my environment. If I change my environment, I personally feel a massive shift in how I'm feeling. And um, I remember one of my friends was like to me, she goes, I've never heard one person complain about doing charity work. And I was like, okay. And then it's like I'm starting to look into doing this. It's called Poops. It's what does it stand for? POOP. It's basically what it is. It's you walk old people's dogs because they can't walk them. So it's like just doing little charitable things. It kind of gets you in a good mood. So whenever I do experience uncomfortable emotions such as grief or sadness, it's like I do give myself the space to experience it rather than just doom scrolling or just trying to zone out. It makes me really become aware, hey, let's work on this rather than shutting it out, which is what I used to do, which is not healthy for me.
Wow. I mean, that's huge from a day-to-day thing of shifting. Like it's like going down to like, and I was reflecting at this just with the new year and kind of like setting goals and stuff, but like not even, it feels much more smaller and also bigger, where it's like you're changing daily things of how you're reacting within the day, which then translates to like these huge life changes of your life changes within those small little things. Like it sounds like also like you shifting your environment is a way that helps you like shift your frequency of like, okay, I'm not dwelling in this. I am going to shift my environment, shifts my frequency, and then you feel better. You're more connected to like gratitude and also giving and receiving and all this, and those are just really good vibes. So like that's such a powerful way to like live day-to-day life of like, oh, let me recognize that, shift my environment. And then yeah, I think that's just beautiful. You getting into like charity work and just seeing how else you can like, it sounds like getting connected to people. Like you were so
Yeah,
connected to people on the trek, but yeah.
definitely.
I'm not familiar with the what you had caught, what you said, poop or something,
Yeah, it's like,
POP. Like I don't know what that
yeah,
is.
it's like I think I'm kicking myself. I can't remember what it stands for. It's like puppies of
But that
old
sounds
people or
fun.
something. It's just something to, I just feel like
So
when you are in
cute.
like a charitable environment, kindness, I think that's such a
Yeah,
beautiful frequency. And
kindness.
that's something that was on the Camino constantly. And then, you
Oh,
come back into your day-to-day life and, you don't really see that as much around. So it's like
yeah,
tapping into that frequency, as you said, is the
yeah.
what's worked for me. Like how we were talking at the start about how Ayurveda is vibing with you. So you're like going with it. So it's like a discovery for me. I'm like, wow, I actually really love this environment and I can create it by tapping into kindness.
Oh, God, that's so beautifully said. That you can create. And that's like when you go on these big things because you're like, oh, your travel, your vacation, or your experience, and then you go back into life. But like you can carry that through with what you just said of like connecting back to like how you felt with it and then bringing it into in your current, reality and have that like shift things for you. Wow. So how do you feel about being in like the 9 to 5 world again and working full time? How's that like? Are you adjusting?
I'm not gonna lie, it's hard. I
I know.
I love traveling. I think I find this 9 to 5 job um, it gives me the ability to travel. So um, it's real like where I'm at now. I'm very happy with. Like I'm doing administration, and that's something that I enjoy doing. Like I love that tedious organizing, that sort of thing. So um, it definitely allows me to fund the travels and the adventures and so forth. Um, but yeah, it's good. I am enjoying it. Like I am starting to get into routine and just trying to make time for you know um, going out, seeing friends and family. Um, yeah, it's getting better. I just got to get into a routine like a little kid,
Right.
basically.
Right. I know what you mean. I literally know. You're like, can we just travel full time? That'd be great. Thank you.
That'll be a dream. But like I honestly do hope
uh,
that you do get over to Spain and you do this Camino. Um
Absolutely. Like,
and you're such a
uh,
people person as well. So I feel like your experience is going to be polar opposite to mine. Like I just think that you're going to experience it in such a phenomenal way because I see how you
uh,
are with people. Like, do you remember when we were in India and everyone would be taking photos of you? And at random cafes, people are naturally drawn to you. So that's why I'm like, I think you're going to have a wicked time. And
oh my
yeah,
God.
honestly, 4 days is enough. If you want to do the 30-day one, go for it. Um, but yeah, I reckon you'd have a great time doing it.
Wow. I love earlier in the conversation, you didn't even say like if. You're like, when you do the Camino. I'm like, yes. I'm like, she knows. She knows eventually I'm going to be there. When you do this.
And
Oh my
honestly,
God. It's,
if you need any tips and pointers, the biggest thing I can say is travel light. You will start realizing, become, back to basics. And you start really appreciating the finer things in life when you come back out of the Camino, like a bath,
oh,
like a comfy bed.
yeah. Uh, Honestly, that was my experience when we had like ended our India experience too. You don't realize all the things, all the luxuries, all of the extras that like you might have or have always had. And then you're like, oh wow, I didn't even realize like that was something that I could be massively grateful for because I just thought that always existed. And then you go to somewhere where that doesn't, and then you're stripped away of it. And then you're like, yeah, you appreciate, and you're like, whoa, I'm so much more grateful for what does exist in my life. But wow. Well, I can't wait to do it. I'm really
I
excited to
can't
look
wait for
into
you to
it.
do it either.
Yeah. And yeah, you're probably absolutely right. I will have probably meet just all sorts of people. I can't help myself. That's why I like to talk to people. That's why I
And not,
podcast.
you will have some very interesting interviews after that,
Uh,
that's for sure. But
yes. Oh my God. Oh, this is brilliant. Well, thank you so much for just sharing your experience with that. And I just really appreciate the conversation and the time. I absolutely loved getting to know you when we were in India. And it's so nice how we can like, yeah, I think, and that's one thing, my one takeaway actually from India was that it was like less about the Kundalini and more about the people that I met, because it's like all the little group that we had. And still like I was able to like, I traveled and connected with a lot of people that on that trip, and then other places that I had met like along my travels. So it was kind of like we met, but then I reconvened and like met people when I was like in Australia and stuff. I never made it over to Perth, but when I do go back, I'll have to hit you up. But yeah, it's like goes back to like I think finding like, I think identifying and knowing where you feel pulled, like whatever you feel guided to do or go, like trust that, because what you think that you're going for is probably not the thing that you're actually going to receive from that place, you know? So it just kind of makes every, I think it starts to make every decision that you do in that intuition space like more like magical and less like, oh, I have to get this out of this. Like it could be completely something different than like what you think it's going to be. But do you have
Well
anything else
said.
to add? You want to share about the trip? Anything that we didn't cover?
I guess the only thing, pretty much to wrap it up and put a nice bow on, is
Yeah.
from this conversation, if there is anyone that is interested in doing the Camino, the biggest thing I want to put across is this is the most cheapest holiday I've ever been on my life. So it you don't need to have a lot of money to do this, because people are so warm and welcoming, and you don't have that expectation of, oh, I need to be wearing all my Lululemon and looking all flash. You're there to walk, and people take you as you are. And when you do have your little booklet, like with all the stamps in it, because this allows you to go stay at the places, because it's designed for people on the Camino. There is that sense of warmth that they're welcoming, because they understand that, like, you must be tired, you must be hungry. They really take care of you. And everyone kept saying to me, like, the Camino provides, and I'll always be like, what does that even mean? And it's basically, I get really thirsty, and then all of a sudden there's a spring, and I'm like, oh, that's handy. Or I'm walking through a village, and I'm like, oh, I feel like something to eat, but I'm not too hungry, and there's a fruit stall, and the guy's like, here, have an apple, and you're just like, oh no. And then it's like, here, like, everyone, the kindness and just the generosity. I originally was looking at doing a tour group, as I mentioned prior, and I think that's going to cost me 1,800 Australian, and I spent 300 Australian, including flights from Switzerland, on my trip.
Wow.
So it's just, I
Wow.
really, really want to put that across, that it's designed for everybody and anybody, all walks of life. You will meet very interesting people, and it's not just a religion. Because a lot of people, I think, when they find it is a religious walk, they're a bit like, nah, not for me. And I respect that, but I also want to stress that it's not just religious people doing this. Atheists are doing it, Buddhist people are doing it. Like, all is welcome. And I think that's really beautiful, that no matter what you look like, what you do, it's like, literally, I remember speaking to someone, and it was like, he was like a millionaire. And I'm like, whoa, like, you're going to meet it's everybody's welcome. And that's the
Yeah.
thing I really love. Like, everyone being included is something that, is very beautiful. So
Ah.
do it.
Well, maybe my husband's waiting for me out there.
I met I met this girl in one of the Albuquerques, right? And
Uh-huh.
then, like, a few days later, I bumped into her, and she's now dating a guy I randomly like. They met on the Camino, and they're still together to this day.
Oh my gosh. See?
Yeah, so
Just
you meet
never
the
know
love of
what's
your
out there
life.
for you.
Yeah,
Yeah. That'll be the new advertisement of the Camino. It's not spiritual.
it's a dating.
It
Just
becomes a
go
date.
there to date someone.
Like if we haven't persuaded anybody to do it enough, they'll be like, yep, I'm going to sign up for that. I'm going to meet my person.
Yeah, because you're going to come into
Oh,
contact with so many people. And I think what was beautiful about them coming together, it was like, oh, I saw that guy like at the start of the trip and then just didn't see him. And I met her because I was in the hostel with her. And then at the end, they're together. And I was like, wow, because you see so many
yeah.
people. So, yeah,
Wow.
people find love on it. People, yeah, people do like little like bike riding it as well. It's whatever you make of it.
Mm,
But the thing I think
mm,
is you don't need to spend a lot of money on this at all. And it literally does provide for you. Like I remember I lost a pair of socks and I was like, oh, the one thing you really need is socks. And this girl next to me, she goes, I literally just bought these socks from the store. There's two, I only need one. Here, have it. And I'm just like going like, this is great. Like everything is just in this
yeah.
flow. So
Wow.
yeah, that's the thing I just really want to leave on. It's open for everybody,
Yeah.
anybody, and
Oh,
go take a hike. It's great.
damn. Now I definitely want to take a hike. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with this. And yeah, I'm absolutely interested in doing it. And it's just a matter of time at this point that it's already
It's
piqued my interest. So
it's just gonna fall into place. Like you'll be over in Europe, and then all of a sudden you'll be in Spain doing it.
you'll
So
just, right, right. And then I'll be like, oh my God, I gotta tell her. Oh, thank you. I guess we'll end it here with that. And yeah, and I just thank you so much for your time for being on the show. And I appreciate what you had said earlier that you enjoy listening. And I really receive that. And I yeah, really, really thankful for this conversation.
likewise, I love that you've got a platform where you dive into I love how open you are and just chatting to you. As I said before, like you're just a magnet with people. Like you've got a real gift to chat to anybody. So it's just been lovely and it's been so nice to see you again,
Oh,
even though it's
I
virtually.
know.
Like you're looking well and I'm just so happy that you're still doing this because I remember when you said it over in India, you're like, yeah, I have a podcast. I was like, that is really cool.
Yeah, right. I know it's definitely shifts and changes the lot like as I go, but that's like with kind of with everything that you just end up finding your groove and stuff. But yeah, I enjoy it a lot.
Love it.
All right, good. Okay, well, have a really good rest of your day, and whoever's listening, have a extremely good day. I hope you feel really inspired to be in flow with your day, in the energy of kindness, with what you have brought forward with the Camino. So I think those are all things, whether we do the hike or not, those are definitely things we can wrap up in our day-to-day experience. So be in that frequency today.
Well spoken.
Uh,
Love it.
yeah.